I thought it was gonna say that I started recording, Jessica. Is it recording?
Yep, I got an indicator that says it started.
Great, thanks.
Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome everyone to this unique and historic first virtual meeting of the HALRB. I'm calling the meeting to order and ask the staff to call the roll, please.
Charles Craig.
Present.
Omari Davis.
Present.
Robert Dudka.
Present.
Sherry Freer. Excused. Sarah Garner.
Here.
Danny Gwynn is excused. Carmela Ham.
Here.
Gerald Laporte.
Here.
Joan Lawrence.
Here.
Liz Rogers.
Here.
Mark Turnbull. Excused. Andrew Wenschel.
Here.
And Richard Woodruff.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Well, welcome again, everyone. Our first order of business is the approval of the February 19th, 2020 draft minutes. Hopefully people can still remember what they said several months ago or have reviewed them recently. But why don't we take 30 seconds to, well, first let me ask, does anyone have any changes they would like to suggest or comments they would like to make with regard to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll give you a few more seconds and ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 19th.
I move we approve the as circulated and submitted and circulated.
I second.
Okay, and who made the motion, please?
Jerry Laporte made the initial motion.
Who was the second?
Joan.
Thank you.
All right, and staff will call the roll, please.
So this is for the approval of the February minutes. Charles Craig.
Yes.
Omari Davis.
Yes.
Robert Dudka.
Yes.
Sarah Garner.
Yes.
Carmela Ham.
Yes.
Gerald Laporte.
Yes.
Joan Lawrence.
Yes.
Liz Rogers.
Yes.
Andrew Wenschel.
Yes.
And Richard Woodruff.
Yes. Would you like to report the vote?
It was unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Next order of business are some prepared remarks that I've been asked to make. Given the unique nature of this meeting, And some of it's boilerplate, but bear with me for a few minutes. For the safety of our board members, county staff, applicants, and participating community members, we're holding a virtual meeting today. First, for this board, all participants with us today are also joining remotely. We are legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the county board's continuity of operations ordinance adopted in March of 2020. Before we begin, I'd like to orient everyone to our new virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how today's meeting will run. Today's meeting is available to stream from the county website via Microsoft Teams link. There's also a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. If board members, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. And this is very important. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Please turn off sound to any other devices you have around you to minimize interference. And if you're not familiar with the way the toolbar works, if you move your cursor around the screen, the toolbar will appear, which will allow you to control both your microphone and your screen, which you'll see the symbols sort of to the left of that toolbar or on the left side of it. For everyone joining us via Teams, again, please turn off your video feed, and I'll discuss when it's appropriate for you to turn it on in a moment. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone that's located on your meeting command bar. Neither the moderators nor I have the ability to unmute you. Only you can do that yourself. If you're dialing in by phone, you'd have to press *6 to unmute. The meeting chat is active for participants who need technical assistance only, and that meeting chat is also, I think, accessible through your toolbar. But again, it's just for technical help. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion, public comment, or questions about agenda items or requests for more information. All of those public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. And then for board members specifically, if you wish to be recognized to speak on an item, please turn on your video feed and leave your microphone muted until I call on you, and then please, unmute your mic and we'll have the conversation. And that's really not to cut anybody off or to make it harder to get in, but just to have an orderly conversation where we're not talking over each other. And feel free to request to be heard as often as you like. Once you've been recognized, please unmute yourself again. And once you've completed speaking, please turn your mute and your video feedback off. And again, I realize we have some board members who have joined us today, I think by phone still. Andy's by phone, correct? And I'll verbally check with you if you wish to be recognized, as you don't have the video feed option. And if I do forget to check with you, unmute yourself, and you want to speak, unmute yourself and let me know. All voting again today will be taken by roll call with Cynthia calling the roll. And then to our applicants and public speakers, I will call on you to speak at the appropriate time when your item is called. And when it is called, staff will speak first and introduce the topic, and then we will, in some cases, refer to the design review committee and then ask you as the applicant to speak. We will not be able to accommodate additional speakers. Registered speakers will not be held over to subsequent meetings. Public comment will take place within the same timeframes as we would ordinarily provide at an in-person meeting. Speakers will have 3 minutes to comment as individuals and 5 minutes to speak if representing an organization. Speakers are not permitted to yield their time to others. During public comment, a speaking timer will be displayed on the screen by staff. If you're dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide an audible warning when 30 seconds are remaining, and you will be muted when your time has concluded. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements by law. And so with that, let's call the first agenda item, which is the Tim Hewson and Ann Brigetta. I'm not asking you to speak yet. 2101 North Kenmore Street. And I'm going to ask staff to please introduce that COA report.
Hello, this is Angelina Jones, and I'll be presenting our staff reports today. So to begin, the dwelling at 2101 North Kenmore Street in the Maywood Local Historic District was constructed before 1926 and is listed as a contributing resource in the Maywood National Register Historic District. Let me go ahead and switch to the slide here. The applicants are asking for retroactive review of a sharing library box they installed on their property at the intersection of 21st Avenue North and North Kenmore Street. The box is manufactured by a national distributor and is a standard design made of pine wood and installed on an approximately 2-foot high wooden post. Staff recommends approval of the sharing library at this location as it is a highly reversible site feature within the historic district. The scale of the sharing library is similar to the scale of mailboxes, which are exempt from review in the Maywood design guidelines. However, sharing libraries differ from mailboxes in that it would be appropriate for every house in Maywood to have a mailbox, as the period of significance for the districts is 1906 to 1941, and the Postal Service was fully implemented in Arlington by 1941. It would not be appropriate for every house in the historic district to have a sharing library, as it is not a historic feature, and that would substantially impact the overall landscape of the neighborhood. So the Historic Preservation Program staff suggests that the HALRB consider the overall quantity and proximity of other sharing libraries in Maywood when reviewing such requests in future. Given the small scale and reversibility of this sharing library, staff finds that it is appropriate for the Maywood Historic District and complies with intent of Chapter 7 site elements of the Maywood Design Guidelines.
Thank you. And now I would like to ask members of the Design Review Committee, Mr. Craig or Mr. Dudka, if they have comments they wish to provide.
Yeah, this is Robert. We saw this and pretty much Angelina's summary is pretty much what the discussion was, and the feeling of the Design Review Committee. The other thing we discussed, which Angelina didn't mention, is that we thought this was one of these things that sort of self-regulates in the sense that if you go into neighborhoods, people don't, every house doesn't have one. If somebody puts one up, it tends to be the only one for, a couple of blocks before you get another one when people feel like there's opportunity. I think people just kind of know you can't put up, one on every house. It doesn't make sense, and so they don't do it. So I think it's probably not going to be a big problem, but that's one of the reasons this is before the board, is because it is potentially an issue. So anyway, but what Angelina's summary is pretty much the discussion at the Design Review Committee.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from Mr. Craig?
No, I concur with Robert.
Okay, thank you. And is Mr. Hewson or Ms. Brigetta present and wanting to make comments?
Yes, I'm Tim Hewson. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Yeah, I would like to say something. Thank you for your time, and I'll read my statement fast. Thank you for your work and your professionalism. We have very much respect for your contributions. We respectfully disagree that you should limit the number or location of sharing libraries. We respectfully disagree over whether you have the authority to limit the number of sharing libraries under the spirit or letter of the historic designation. Maywood is not a museum. It's a thriving, living community. We put up the library to share from our family to other families and other members of the community of Arlington. It's been swamped with books and interests. When we christened the library, the block came out to join the celebration. People go to it every day. If for some reason there was a desire for every third house or every second house or every house to put up a box to share their books, what a fantastic sign of a thriving community that would be. Why would that happen? What if the Arlington libraries can't reopen? It's been 4 months. What if it's 4 years until the libraries open? What if a social movement rises up from the despair of 2020 and says, we're going to join together as a community and share our books? But no, you in effect, if you make a policy like that, are saying you don't think it'd be appropriate to have such a thriving community. You know the citizens better than the community. In 1906 to 1941, every house didn't have a wooden box for books. Every house had a box for letters, but not a box for books. Well, in 1906 into the 1930s, they could have built a box, but they couldn't afford to share books, so they didn't make a little book box. In 1906 into the 1930s, families here didn't own cars. This neighborhood existed because there was a streetcar stop. There was probably only 1 or 2 cars per block, not 2 cars per house. So by the same logic that says you can limit the number of wooden sharing boxes, you could say you could limit the number of cars. You could say only 2 cars per block or no car parking on the streets. When the citizens of Maywood voted to create a historic district, we think they voted to say, we all agree we're not going to tear down a historic house and replace it with a big modern house. We don't think we voted to say we're voting to create a board that'll say how many families can put little wooden landing boxes in their yard. If there'd been an amendment to say that, Maywooders have said, no, that's not what we mean. I'm not a lawyer, but the people of Maywood didn't mean to grant you that authority. So we think that you're violating the spirit and letter of the agreement if you try to assume that authority. As far as we know, we're the only house that's putting up a sharing library. Your time and our time is too valuable to create an unnecessary policy to limit the number of sharing boxes. You want to create a policy for a problem that doesn't exist. Any debate on the issue is going to make everybody here, all these people waiting for approval of real projects, wait. We respectfully argue you drop the idea to limit the number of sharing libraries. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your remarks. And I assume you speak for Ms. Brigade as well.
I do.
Okay, thank you. The matter is now before the board.
We have 2 public comments.
Oh, we have some other public comments with respect to this? That's right. In writing, correct?
Yes, that were submitted via writing, and I can read them. And Serena's going to be projecting the this onto the screen too, so that people can see it if they're watching. So the first comment was submitted by Leah Maderal on July 16th, 2020. She says, Dear Ms. Jones, I am writing in support of the Certificate of Appropriateness of Z2686-90-HD, the sharing library box at the corner of 21st Avenue North and North Kenmore Street. The library box fits right into the historic Maywood and even looks a bit like the house behind it. It is well constructed and is a lovely resource for neighbors to pick up a book to read. The Houstons have worked to transform the corner from a weedy patch the dogs loved to a mini garden. The library box makes it even nicer. Please share my comments with the HALRB members. Best, Leah. The second comment is from Janet Barzy, submitted July 20th, 2020 via email. Dear Ms. Jones, I am writing in support of HALRB approval of the sharing library box at the corner of 21st Avenue North and North Kenmore Street. As a 34-year resident of 21st Avenue North, I can state without reservation that the library box is a welcome addition at this corner for several reasons. First, it is a nice local resource. I have taken books from and added books to this mini library. Second, the box replaced many weeds that served as a local dog outhouse. Third, the box's tasteful and colorful design fits into historic Maywood. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Janet Barzy. And that concludes the public comment.
Great, thank you. The matter is now before the board, and Mr. Houston, if you could turn your camera off, that would be good. Thank you. Are there comments from members of the board? Please turn your video on if you'd like to make a remark. Is somebody trying to get in and muted? Okay, I'm not hearing any remarks from anyone on the board.
I would like to say something.
Please.
Okay. I don't know where the idea of setting a policy came from, but this is Joan Lawrence, by the way, for the record. But I think that our approach to this can be what it typically is, and that is a case-by-case basis, considering all of the factors, and that I don't see us setting a policy limiting numbers. I tend to agree with Mr. Dudka that this is a self-limiting sort of thing, and I'm happy to look at each proposal on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to applaud what Joan just said. I thought I intend to vote for this on the basis of this being a case by case. And I did notice that sentence in the staff report where the staff expresses the opinion that it wouldn't be appropriate to have one of these boxes. And I didn't think that was essential to reach the conclusion. I don't regard that sentence in the staff report in any way of setting a policy for how many future boxes we should permit. I think it's, if somebody wants to submit a COA, we'll look at it when it comes in without establishing any policy at all at this time.
Thank you. That was, for the record, Mr. Laporte. Any other speakers from the board on this matter? Mr. Dudka.
Yeah, I agree with Jerry. And as I said earlier, I think these things tend to self-regulate. But I guess what the board ought to consider is whether in the future, given the comment that the staff made, in the future, let's say that every house wanted one, you really couldn't review it on a case-by-case basis at that point, because you've essentially created a precedent that would allow this to happen. And I don't think it's an issue, because I think people just don't do it that much. But if they wanted to, that's something that the board needs to be aware of before they vote. That's all I'm saying. I don't think it will be a problem. It isn't a problem in any neighborhood I've ever seen. And as Mr. Hudson was saying, if you had a lot of these boxes, I'm not sure that it would be a bad thing for the neighborhood. And what we could do is regulate the way in which the form in which they take, so that they do become a more compatible element within the neighborhood.
Thank you. Other comments? Any other member of the board wish to speak on this? If not, I'll just wrap up the conversation by saying that I would associate myself somewhat with the remarks of the Mr. Hewson. I think that I think also that these boxes are probably self-regulating, that you're not going to wind up with one in front of every house. I do think the board probably does have the authority to regulate those under the Maywood guidelines, but I don't see a problem with having a lot of them, to be honest. But that's just my point of view. Unless anyone has any further comments, I'm going to make a motion on this. And I'll do that now. I move that the HLRB approve COA 20-07 to allow the existing sharing library at 2101 North Kenmore Street, given the small scale and reversibility of the sharing library. It complies with the intent of Chapter 7 site elements of the Maywood design guidelines. Is there a second?
I second. Omari Davis.
Thanks, Omari. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask staff to call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
You can say approve or not approve, whichever. is
Approve.
easier.
Okay. Approve. Thank you.
Mr. Davis?
Approve.
Mr. Dedka?
Approve.
Ms. Garner?
Approve.
Ms. Ham?
approve,
Mr. Laporte?
Approve.
Ms. Lawrence?
Approve.
Ms. Rogers?
Approve.
Mr. Wenschel?
Approve.
And Mr. Woodruff?
Approve.
One last call. Has Ms. Freer joined the meeting? Or Mr. Turnbull? Okay, so it is unanimous 10-0.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Houston.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time and thoughts.
You bet. All right. Now I will call item number 2. It is the COA application presented by Henry and Ann Kelly for 2210 North Nelson Street. Staff, could you please present the staff position?
Yes. The dwelling at 2210 North Nelson Street in the Maywood Local Historic District was constructed before 1915 and is listed as a contributing resource to the Maywood National Register Historic District. The applicants are seeking to install an electric vehicle charger on the north elevation, not the primary elevation, of the historic dwelling in the same location where utility boxes are clustered. If the COA amendment is approved, it would modify COA 2003, which approved the installation of the charger on an approximately 4-foot tall cedar post near the public right-of-way. The owners have confirmed that their property extends to the curb and that there is no right-of-way or sidewalk easement on their property. The parcel does not have a driveway or a parking pad. The applicants park their car on the public street and need the charger to be in proximity to where they will be parking. The applicants propose to install the charger directly on the north side of their house, which is clad in non-historic aluminum siding. The charging cord will be long enough to extend from the house to the public street, North Nelson Street, where the applicants park their car. The charger is designed with a space to hang the charging wire, and it will not interfere with any of the other utilities also installed on the wall of that wall of the house. The applicants do not know whether there is historic wooden siding under the aluminum siding or not. However, there will be minimal impact to fabric under the aluminum siding, as the only anticipated work would be possibly to drill a small diameter hole through the wall to run cables to the electric vehicle charger. Please note that due to the public health crisis occasioned by COVID-19, the DRC has not been able to convene since the owners submitted their COA application. This item, therefore, has been placed on tonight's HALRB agenda as a discussion item without any additional consideration or recommendations by the DRC. Staff recommends approval of the amendment to COA 2003 that will allow the applicants to install the electric vehicle charger on the north side of their house in the same area where utility boxes already are mounted. While such vehicle chargers are likely to become more common in Arlington neighborhoods, this application will serve as a model for future electric vehicle chargers in the Maywood Historic District. Although it is not typically appropriate to locate site elements at the front portion of Maywood dwellings, this parcel has several unusual constraints that I just discussed that make it necessary to consider the front of the dwelling as an appropriate location. Namely, there is no right-of-way easement, driveway, or parking pad. Furthermore, the scale of this site element is similar to that of a mailbox, a design feature that is exempt from HALRB review, and will be mounted on non-historic siding on a non-primary elevation that has low visibility from the right-of-way, rather than as a freestanding element in this landscape, which was previously proposed. So for these reasons, staff finds that the proposed installation is appropriate for the Maywood Historic District and complies with Chapter 7 site elements of the Maywood Design Guidelines. I'm going to click through a few images. So you'll see here on the flat.
Angelina,
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we're having an issue not being able to see your screen.
All right, let me try sharing again.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me know. All right, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
So, so location A here on the property is the preferred location of the applicants. They also gave location B as a second option if the HALRB were to determine that location A on the house is inappropriate. Location B would be on a post, similar to the initial application that was approved under 2003. On the left side here, you see specs for the charger, and on the right side, you see an image. The green paper is where the charger would be located among the existing utilities. And then these existing condition photos show the low visibility of that part of the house from the right-of-way due to the hedge and the grade change. That concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina. My understanding is that DRC saw this original application, but not the subsequent change. So it's not our intent to call on them specifically, but we will get to all the board members in a second. But would like to hear first from Mr. Kelly, if he's on the line or wishes to speak.
Hello, this is Henry Kelly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think your staff report was excellent and covered all of the major points, so I don't have much to contribute. Our original proposal, which was reviewed, was to put a charging post near the street, but I discovered that I was able to find a charger that had a cord long enough to reach the street, and that explains the change in plan. As you can see from the photos, the charger will be next to the natural gas hookup, the Verizon box, and the electric meter. So it will not be more obtrusive than any of those. So with that, I respectfully request your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And now I'll ask the board members if any of them wish to speak on the issue. Mr. Dudka?
Yeah, so I think that provided a good summary. Personally, you can poll the other DRC members, but I don't think that this is a problem. I think this is a very good solution given the site-specific conditions of this property, and given that it's next to the electric meter, and so forth. It's not really going to add an element where there weren't already service elements on this house. So I think it's an excellent solution, and I would support it.
Thank you. Are there other members of the board who wish to speak?
Yes, it's Charles Craig. I agree. This was on our initial wish list to install it either on the porch or on the house. So this completely solves that problem. So
Okay.
I do support this.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to speak? All right. If not, I'm prepared to make a motion. I move that the HLRB approve COA 20-03A to allow installation of an electric vehicle charging station near the front of the property on the site of the historic dwelling at 2210 North Nelson Street. And further note, pursuant to the staff report accompanying COA 20-03A, that the property has several unusual constraints that make it necessary to consider the front of the dwelling as an appropriate location. The proposed installation complies with Chapter 7, Site Elements of the Maywood Design Guidelines. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second it. Sarah Garner.
Thank you. Is there further discussion of the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask Ms. Lachese Torres to call the vote.
Sure. Please say approve or not approve. Mr. Craig?
Approve.
Mr. Davis?
Approve.
Mr. Dudka?
Approve.
Ms. Garner?
Approve.
Ms. Ham?
approve,
Mr. Laporte?
Approve.
Ms. Lawrence?
Approve.
Ms. Rogers?
Approve.
Mr. Wenschel?
approve,
And Mr. Woodruff?
Approve.
It's unanimous.
Excellent. Well, that was a fairly lengthy process, Mr. Kelly. Congratulations. I'm glad we were able to get that finished months later.
Thank you.
All right.
We've been kind of hunkered down because of the coronavirus.
Right. Okay. So moving forward to item 3, the proposal COA of Stephen and Sarah Young at 2324 North Edgewood Street. I'll ask Ms. Jones to give the staff report.
All right, you can all see my screen, right? The slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes.
So the dwelling at 2324 North Edgewood Street was constructed around 1935. The house and the garage on the property are both contributing resources in the National Register Historic District. The applicants are requesting to add solar panels on the roof of the non-historic addition at the rear of the dwelling and to the roof, or rather the dormer, on the contributing detached garage. The application is for a total of 24 panels. That would be 19 panels arranged asymmetrically on the roof of the addition, and 5 panels arranged in a rectangle on the dormer of the garage. Please note that while the newest update to the Maywood Design Guidelines adopted in March 2020 does allow for the installation of solar panels to be reviewed administratively under specific circumstances, this application does not meet the requirements for administrative staff review for the following reasons. First, the proposed configuration is disjointed and spans several roofs. Second, some of the panels are proposed for installation on an architectural element, namely the dormer. Third, some of the panels are proposed for the garage, which is a contributing resource. And 4, the panels proposed for the garage will be visible from the right-of-way. Staff recommends approval of the subject application. The contributing garage is set back more than 88 feet from the street. While the garage is historic, the material to be impacted by the addition of the 5 solar panels will be asphalt shingles, which are a sacrificial material. The 19 additional proposed panels will be mounted on the roof of a non-historic rear addition to the dwelling and will not be highly visible from the right-of-way. The scope of this project meets the intent of Chapter 5, Exterior Renovation, and Appendix G of the Maywood Design Guidelines by minimizing impact to the character of the historic buildings on the property and reducing the visual impact from the right-of-way. I'm going to click through a few images. So this is where the historic dwelling is on the property. Here's the garage. And then here's North Edgewood Street, so you can see how far back the garage is set back from the street. These are some existing condition photos. This is the dormer of the contributing garage where the solar panels are proposed for installation. And then this plan shows the arrangement, the proposed arrangement of the solar panels. So there's the 5 on the dormer of the garage, and then the 19 all on the non-historic addition to the house. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you. I understand this project went to the Design Review Committee, so we'll hear from either or both of Mr. Craig and Mr. Dudka.
I'll speak. I guess I'll speak. This came before the design review committee, and we took a look at it. I'm not sure that we had the opportunity to ask the applicant questions. I can't remember now, but in general, I think we felt that the panels that were on the addition were okay. But the panels that were on the garage can be, number one, it's a contributing structure. Number two, it can be seen from the right of way, as staff has reported. And the question that I think the DRC had was why can't, in the same way that the solar panels are put on the back of the house, on the main part of the house, why can't they be put on the back of the garage as opposed to being put on the dormer, which is visible from the street? And I guess that would be a question that I would ask before we gave any kind of an approval, because I believe that it seems like you ought to be able to put them on the back, but it would be useful to hear from the applicant as to why that may or may not be possible.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Craig?
I don't have any questions other than that.
Okay. And is Mr. Young, either Stephen Young or Sarah Young, on the line?
I'm here, yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
So the reason for the panels on the dormer is that that's a better spot for the solar gain. It's better to have a flat is better than angled because you get more rays when the surface is flatter, and so you get a better performance from the panels on the front of the dormer than the back. So that's my preference, to have them there, simply because it's more beneficial. It is true that you can, if you crane your neck around a corner and under the trees, see the dormer, but it's hard. You don't walk by and casually glance and see them. I don't think ever. I'm surprised it's even an issue given how far back it is from the road, and the fact that there's a tree in the way that actually blocks that dormer view from most spots from the driveway. So I think it's a very modest impact, given it's on the dormer that's angled anyway. It's raised above the street. It's a street that the driveway is fairly steep, so you're actually well above you. So it's actually, I think, a very modest imposition on the view of the house at all, having them on the dormer. I had an initial proposal on the roof as well as the dormer of the garage, and that was rejected. So I took them off the roof, and they're now only on the dormer of the garage, which is less visible than the rest of the roof of the garage.
Okay, thank you. Stick around in case there are additional questions presented to you. Mr. Craig.
Yes, I have a question for staff. Did you look at the back of the garage from the neighbor's perspective? And the reason I'm asking about that is, could they be attached on the back of the garage, and then where the roof slopes down, they would be raised up on some sort of metal support? I don't know if that's a possibility. If this is about angle, then that might solve the problem. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, so staff has not done that field work to see what the view would be from the backside of the house, or from the back of the house, for the neighbor
right,
other side. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
Sorry, that was Angelina making that comment.
Mr. Young?
Can I basically, if you look at the pictures, the bottom left picture is the garage from the ground. As you see, you can't see the roof at all from the ground, and it's even worse from the street. You're, again, lower down. The view in the top right actually is the view of the dormer on the house itself, not of the garage. So the top right picture in the middle column is that's actually the house. Well, there'll be panels there as well. But the one that's on the garage is the lower left one, where you won't be able to see them. They will not be visible at all from anywhere, I don't think.
Just a point of clarification. Are the panels on the front or the back of the garage roof?
They're on the front of the garage roof on that dormer there in the lower left picture. But again, you can't see that angle from unless you have elevation.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it from the street.
This is Angelina Jones. So Dick, the public right-of-way is here. Can you see my cursor?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the garage and the arrangement on the dormer. But as Mr. Young was pointing out, this is the garage here. So because of the slant of the dormer, it's not highly visible on the ground.
Got it. Are there other members of the board who wish to address this issue?
Dick, I have a question.
Please, go ahead.
If because my neighbor has panels, and even though they're high off the ground, panels are not absolutely flat to the roof. They have thickness, and so one issue would be how much above the surface of the roof is the surface of the panel, because I think you're going to see the edge of these panels from the public right of way, even if you can't see the face of the panel. And then the other issue for the board is one of precedent, because if it becomes sort of subjective what is mostly not visible as opposed to not visible at all. And the fact that there's a tree there is not really relevant, because trees, as we know, are vulnerable, and there may not be a tree there someday, and the view may be uninterrupted. So it seems to me that the real question is how, if it's going to go on the dormer, how visible will it be? Because I think it will be visible, at least in profile, poking up above the surface of the roof, and is that something that we're prepared to allow in the future?
Well, I'll address that point myself. It looks to me from the picture on the far left in the middle, which depicts the garage from the street, that it's true that you can barely see the garage. I mean, it's a small resolution picture, but you can barely see the garage. And to suggest that you could see the solar panels sticking up a few inches strikes me as not plausible. But not knowing how high it stands, I'd be reluctant to press that point. I would ask Mr. Young, how far off the roof will those things be, do you think?
I believe it's 4 or 5 inches. I think my materials has the thickness of the solar panels in there. Actually, I'm not sure if you can pull it up or not, but basically my submission had some panel descriptions. I don't have it at my fingertips. I can try and track it down if you want to. I'll look it up now.
We're working on looking it up in the background. I'll jump in when we have it.
I think five inches is actually pretty substantial. I didn't realize they stuck up that high. Are there other comments?
Mr. Andy.
Mr. Winchell, please go ahead.
Yes. I think there was legislation passed in the recent Virginia legislature this past session about was basically, I think, guidance for homeowners associations, but basically it said that one should not be unreasonable in regards to zoning or homeowners requests or whatever, or homeowners association requests or whatever, for the licensing of solar panels. They should go on the best surfaces available, if at all possible. And I think that it is not unreasonable to put the solar panels suggested on the outbuilding, if you will, of the garage in the back. I think that's quite reasonable. I think the only objection I think that might be reasonable is if solar panels were proposed on the front of the roof or the front dormer, where they would be highly visible and perhaps, since this is a contributing structure, be somewhat detrimental. But I don't see, I think the outbuilding is far enough removed from the street facade or the street right away that you're not going to see that, and I don't think it's reasonable to try and pursue this further. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the board?
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Young because it's very difficult to tell from the photos. What is the back of the garage roof like? Is this I mean, I just really can't tell. It looks like obviously the dormer looks like it has a flat roof, but it looks like the front part of the roof of the garage has a very low slope. And I wondered about the back roof of the garage. Is that similar to the front?
I believe it's the same. I'm trying to remember if this tries to be the same, or I think they're, if not the same, very similar.
Okay, thank you. I have seen solar panels that are actually put up a little bit higher on a roof surface, and I wonder if that might be a solution for the garage, to put it on the back roof, but raised up a little bit. Is that something you looked into at all?
So I just went with the data from the solar provider who did the sketches for the layout, and basically the performance on the front of the dormer is where they recommended placing the panels. I don't know what I mean, basically you want to have, the ideal is to have south-facing panels. These are not facing south. Only have two panels that are facing south, truly. They're mostly facing, I think it's, I'm sorry, you want, yeah. So mostly facing southwest, which is less than ideal in the first place. And so with the ones on the dormer are better positioned in that sense than the ones in the back of the garage. Unless possibly you could raise them up and tilt them appropriately, but that would require probably more work on their part and would cost me more money. It would be increased cost on my end to have the structures in place to have them raised up, I would assume. But that's my guess, not actual fact.
Thank you.
And this is Angelina Jones. The panels, according to the specs that Mr. Young submitted, will be between 1 and 2 inches in thickness.
And how far will they be placed from the roof?
That information isn't on the spec sheet. I think the installation, here, I'll double check those spec sheets, but I don't think that information is provided.
I mean, for me, it's a little bit of an academic question for me. I'm just curious. I think it would be helpful to know. My personal opinion is that it's okay, that you can barely see it from the road. And that as Mr. Wenchel pointed out, my inclination is to defer to encouraging, ways to encourage people to install solar panels on their homes for obvious reasons.
Dick, this is Charles Craig.
Yes, Charles.
Well, that Joan was brought up was what I was proposing earlier, that if they go on the back of the garage roof, there are going to be, I assume, 4 spots where each panel is mounted. and that is mounted onto the roof, and then the panel is attached to it, so that two of them would have longer legs, say a foot. I don't know how long, I don't know the pitch of the roof, but that would then improve the angle, and solve the problem of having them on the front at all. But that went along with the question about the neighbor, and could the neighbor see them, and would the neighbor object?
In the other factor is if there are actually trees on his property, and the trees shade the back half of the garage more than the front half of the garage. So again, it's the performance of the panels. The trees they basically shade the back of the roof when the sun is low in the sky much more than they do the front of the roof. So it's an issue of performance for my panels.
This is Joan again. I think that the issue that I'm looking at is we've got a historic contributing outbuilding, and we're about to make a decision affecting that outbuilding. And so I think that any motion that we make here has got to be very detailed and take into account the distance of the structure from the right of way and the fact that it can't be seen. I'm thinking of the solar panels that are on 22nd Street, and they're a good 6 to 8 inches above the surface of the roof. They were put in a few years ago, so hopefully this is something that won't be quite as much above the roof as those.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cynthia, I just wanted to make the friendly reminder that we are about 10 minutes behind schedule. We have the meeting until 7 o'clock. We still have 2 cases. So just want to remind you to keep the conversation moving.
Okay. Are there any other further comments?
I just wanted to, Angelina Jones, I just wanted to say that we've confirmed that the specs that we received as part of this application are only for the membrane. It doesn't specify how high this will be set off of the roof.
Dick,
okay, thank you.
I want to address that because it seems to me we can't properly approve something if we don't know exactly what it is that we're approving. So until we know how high above the roof these things are going to be mounted. Personally, I think given the distance and the angle of the roof, the fact, as the applicant has stated, you from the street, you're fairly far below. It's acceptable in my view, but I don't, but as Joan was saying, if it's mounted 8 inches, some of these are mounted fairly high up. That's just their standard installation. If they were flat to the roof, I think we would probably all think it was fine, but right now my concern is we don't know what we're approving, and so until we know how high above the roof it is, in terms of the their standard installation, I'm reluctant to approve it just because I don't know what I'm approving.
Well, it's unfortunate that we don't have that information, given that it's difficult for us to get together and approve something later in this era that we're living in right now. But here's my general sense of it: that one, you can barely see the garage from the street. 2, if they're mounted on the front, you may be able to see the representation of the profile of the solar panels on the front. But if you put this, if you rig up the back of the garage to put the solar panels on the back, just so that you're obviating a view of them from the street, what have you then done to the historic structure? You've altered that historic structure in a way that makes it look probably ridiculous from any other angles. So I don't necessarily think that that's a solution. My sense tonight is to try and make a motion, and then if it needs to be tailored to, work so that it applies only to this particular COA, or that it requires that I don't really want it to have to come back to the board, but if it had to, I suppose someone could make that amendment and just, dispose of this one way or another tonight.
Dick, can I make a suggestion? In our motion, perhaps we can limit the height of the panel above the surface of the roof to say 4 inches or something. And if it was more than that, then the applicant would have to come back to us and basically work something out. But because that way we could pick a number that everybody's comfortable with. I would be comfortable with 4 inches. I might even, given how far back it is, I might be comfortable with 5. But if it was 8, or let's heaven forbid say a foot above the thing, I wouldn't want to see that. So in the motion, perhaps we can just limit it to a height above the roof. Because I agree with you, Dick. I'm not sure I would want to see, panels on the back of the garage levitating up, because I think, just to get the angle, because, it's a historic structure, and even if it's only seen by the neighbor or a couple of neighbors, it's still, their view of the historic structure. So I agree with you on that, Dick. So maybe in the motion, we can just limit how high, above the roof is allowable, and that way we could proceed. Okay,
well, that might be a solution, and I guess I would go back and ask Ms. Jones again, what was the height of the panel itself?
The thickness is, it's in millimeters, so it's not a very nice one to bring into Imperial, but it's 1.2 inches of thickness to a little bit over 2 inches. There's a range, possible range of thickness. And I wanted to confirm with Mr. Young that you aren't sure what the installation method would be, because there are a few different installation methods for this type of solar panel.
No, I am not.
Was that the number you just gave, was that for the membrane or the panel or both?
It's for the panel or membrane. I mean, it's for the solar panel itself. It's not for the installation. So
okay, so say for the sake of argument it's 2 inches, and then under Robert's construct it could then not be built more than 2 inches above the roof, correct? Is that what you're suggesting, Robert, for a total of 4 inches?
Yeah, or if we decide it's 5 inches, yes, that is what because often they mount them on some sort of runners, or or something that are first attached to the roof, and then the panels are attached to the runners, and so that gives you, and also it allows the rain to flow underneath. There's usually there's different ways of installing them, but since we don't know what the technique is, if we were just to limit it to what we felt comfortable seeing, then they could, as long as they were working within that dimension, then it's fine.
Well, what if it turns out to be 5.5 inches?
Then I would think that the applicant would have to come back and say it's 5.5, and maybe we would say, sure, 5.5, or maybe, I don't know.
Waste of everyone's time.
Well, then if people are comfortable with 6 inches, then I'm just saying that I don't think it's a responsible thing for the board to approve something that we don't know what we're approving.
Well, why don't we suggest that it can't be greater than, well, I guess that's the same thing.
Right.
Well, I don't know what the appropriate number is. 4 inches seems too short to me.
I'd go with, I would be okay with 5. So.
Could I interject here? This is Andy.
Mr. Young, do you have a comment? Oh,
are you talking to me?
I think it's Mr. Wenchel. Andy, are you trying to say something?
Yes, I was trying to say something. I think, as I said before, I think some of the comments that we're making could be construed as being somewhat unreasonable, as the Virginia legislature has already indicated that in recent legislation that they want to encourage solar panels. And I think that the applicant's proposal on the outbuilding is appropriate, and to a great extent, solar panels are usually mounted if the roof is at all adequate, and this is a low slope dormer. That's probably quite appropriate given its orientation. They're usually mounted close to the roof surface or within reason so that you can get water to flow under them or whatever, but you don't want them, unless you really want to replace your solar panels often, mount them on a steep angle or to the roof or whatever, because you'll get the solar panel will get lifted off the roof by a high wind like the thunderstorm we had today. So I really think that I'd like to say that I think this is a reasonable application, and I have no problem with the application of the solar panels to the outbuilding at the back of the property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other, in the interest of time, we need to move along, but do any of the other members of the board have, or any others have a comment?
Yes, I think the problem here is that we should be trying to provide some incentive to keep it as low as possible. And at whatever dimension we choose, if it's 4, 5, or 6, that sort of provides a disincentive to make it as low as possible. So I would say, let's try to, I would say that the resolution should say something like keep them as low as possible, but not above such and such a thing, because as Robert said, there are different ways that you can mount these things, and it maybe one is cheaper than, we just don't know what the alternatives are. It could be at 4 inches, but it's a lot cheaper to put it at 6. So if we put it at 6, they'll put it at 6 to save money. So we just don't know what we're approving. So, but I think we need some, as I said, some incentive to keep it as low as possible. And I'd like to build that into the resolution if we approve it.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cynthia.
Yes.
One of staff's suggestions might be in this case to make a motion for a conditional COA approval up to a certain height above the roof that then could be verified by staff with the homeowners when they have a fuller understanding of the specs and how it will be installed. And then if it differs from that amount, then we would work with the applicants to come back. But if it meets the parameters that you set within your motion, then we would be able to issue the COA paperwork. Something to consider.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm actually more inclined, I think, to go with Jerry's suggestion with a motion. And unless anyone else wishes to speak on it, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. And if others would like to amend it, they are welcome to. But would anyone else like to speak? Okay. I move that the HLRB approve COA 20-04 to allow installation of solar panels on the non-historic rear addition of the house and on the front of the historic garage, provided the panels on the historic garage are as low profile as possible. And this is in accordance with the subject application at 2324 North Edgewood Street. The HLRB notes that the project meets the intent of Chapter 5 exterior renovation and Appendix G of Maywood Design Guidelines by minimizing impact to the character of the historic buildings of the property and reducing the visual impact from the right-of-way. I'm seeking a motion. A second.
I'd like to make an amendment. After as low as possible, I'd like to insert not to exceed 6 inches. Also, you might clarify that these are on the top of the dormer on the garage.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any, is there a second to the motion? And before we second the motion, I'm sorry. I think I'd like to have a separate vote on Joan's amendment. Can we do that? Ms. Lachese Torres?
You were breaking up. I missed your question. Could you please repeat it, Mr. Chair?
Can we have a separate vote on Ms. Lawrence's amendment?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not sure how you do that since it's a perfecting amendment, but the first vote will be on the motion that I read plus Ms. Lawrence's addition. And then if that fails, then the second vote will be on the original motion. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second?
Would you like me to?
Well, do you want to read
Who
it?
was the second? Do you want me to read the motion back?
Well, let's see if we can get a second first. Is there a second?
Okay.
Second.
And who is that?
I'll second it.
Andy.
I will second it.
I think Wenchel was in first. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay, so the motion would you like me to repeat the motion?
Yes.
I move that the HALRB approved COA 2004 to allow installation of solar panels on the non-historic rear addition to the house and on the front of the dormer of the historic garage, provided the panels on the historic garage are as low in profile as possible, not to exceed 6 inches, in accordance with the subject application at 2324 North Edgewood Street. The HLRB notes that the project meets the intent of Chapter 5, Exterior Renovation, and Appendix G of the Maywood Design Guidelines by minimizing impact to the character of the historic buildings on the property and reducing the visual impact from the right-of-way.
Thank you. Is there further discussion of the motion as amended by Ms. Lawrence?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify in that I assume that if we pass this, that there will be a verification process. And I would assume that would be just with the staff, that the applicant would have to come to the staff and say, this is what we found. This is as low as possible. Will you approve the installation? And the staff would have to sign off on whatever is provided by verification.
Well, that's not the standard process when we approve a COA.
Yeah, but how are you going to, you need some sort of way to test whether they've done it as low as possible. And it seems to me there has to be some sort of verification or submission or something like that. Yeah, we could, I mean, you could amend it to say to be verified by the staff. That might make it clearer.
As on the end of Ms. Lawrence's amendment, not to exceed 6 inches as verified by staff, or is it not necessary if that amendment passes?
I think this is on your amendment, and I think Ms. Lawrence's amendment is a separate question.
Okay.
And you know, we can go out and measure whether it's above 6 inches, so you don't have to have any kind of a verification procedure built into the process.
All right. So if we amend the original motion where it says as low profile as possible, as to be verified by staff, does that serve your purpose?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, this is Angelina Jones. I have concern as staff taking on that responsibility of verifying that it's the lowest possible option. What documentation do you imagine we would be asking for in that case, Mr. Laporte?
I would assume that you would be getting some representation from the applicant that they've consulted with their contractor, and these are the alternatives. And this is the alternative that they chose because it was the lowest one possible.
We also, have Serena Bollinger as our inspector out in the field, and she can verify at that point that it doesn't exceed 6 inches. I'm not sure that having this extra step in the process before I issue the COA is going to lead to a different result than it would otherwise.
Okay.
Well, supposing they go to the contractor and they say we can put it in true 3, 4, 5, or 6, and 6 is the cheapest, and they say, okay, we'll take 6. But if we had this verification procedure in place, they would have been required to come to the staff and chosen 3. That's why it would make a difference. It would make a big difference because otherwise you're just putting in 6 inches, and that wasn't the intent of my original suggestion. It was to try to build a way to try to get it as low as possible, not just to set it at some arbitrary height.
For clarification, then I would be asking for the applicant to provide me with a written statement from their contractor that says that that's the lowest possible profile.
Can I?
You could.
Jerry, why don't we just vote and dispose of this, because getting a statement from the contractor is simply going to be not necessarily. I mean, you can get your contract. It's like going to your doctor for a note to get you out of the draft.
I'm just trying to make it easier and helpful and get this done tonight.
All right. Well, here's what I'm going to suggest to get it done as soon as possible. Let's keep the original motion with the original amendment. We've already seconded it. Let's vote right now on Joan's amendment.
Okay, I will call the roll. Say approved or not approved. Mr. Craig.
Approve.
Mr. Davis.
Approved.
Mr. Dudka.
Approve.
Ms. Garner.
Approve.
Ms. Ham.
Approved.
Mr. Laporte.
Not approved.
Ms. Lawrence.
Approve.
Ms. Rogers.
Approve.
Mr. Wenschel.
Approve.
And Mr. Woodruff.
Not approve.
Not approve.
Correct.
So the motion carries 8-2.
All right. And now we vote on the final motion.
Yes.
Can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Craig.
Approve.
Mr. Davis.
Approve.
Mr. Dudka.
Just to clarify that that's Dick's original motion, right?
As amended by
Joan.
Joan.
Oh, as amended by Joan. Approve.
Yes. Ms. Garner.
Approve.
Ms. Ham.
Approved.
Mr. Laporte.
Yeah, I vote to approve, but I thought that's what we had voted on. I was confused as to what we were voting on before, frankly. But I'll vote to approve this.
Okay.
Cynthia, I thought the same thing. I thought I was voting in the first time for what we're voting on now. I assume if this passes, it will supersede what we voted on earlier?
No, this is the amended motion with Joan's amendment included.
So now you're voting on the actual COA application itself.
Okay.
So, Ms. Lawrence,
Approve.
Ms. Rogers,
Approve.
Mr. Wenschel,
Approve.
and Mr. Woodruff.
Approve.
It's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes, or yes, Mr.
Mr. Young.
Mr. Young, sorry. So I guess just so you understand, well, staff will let you know what this was, but it looks like you have to do this within 6 inches of the roof. You know, to the members of the board, I'm sorry if there was confusion over that vote. The motion, the first vote was on the amendment to include Jones' language, which was approved. And so the second vote was on the entire motion, which was the approval of the COA. Sorry if that wasn't clear. And if anybody wishes to change their vote on the first on the first vote, I think you can probably do that. Is that correct, staff?
I think, this is Cynthia. I think now that you voted on the COA, I don't think we can go back and change the earlier motion.
I'm not suggesting the earlier motion. I'm just suggesting
I'm sorry, the earlier tally, because the motion carried. It still passed 8-2.
Right. Okay, fine. Let's move on.
Okay.
We are now at item 4, David and Linnea Topol, 2206 North Kenmore Street. Staff, would you please present the report?
Yes. The dwelling at 2206 North Kenmore Street was constructed before 1923. The dwelling on the property is a contributing resource in the National Register Historic District. The outbuilding, listed in the nomination as a guest house, is non-contributing and likely was constructed around 1999 based on Arlington's building permit records. Note that while the shed's non-contributing status is defined by the National Register of Historic Places nomination for Maywood, this categorization also applies to the outbuilding's local historic district status. There is not a separate local historic district nomination form for the Maywood Local Historic District. The HALRB therefore references the historic status of resources in the National Register nomination to consider the appropriateness of changes to resources within the local historic district boundaries. The applicant is requesting to demolish the approximately 490 square foot non-historic outbuilding that is sited behind the primary dwelling on the parcel. The applicants do not currently have plans to construct a new replacement outbuilding. Please note that due to the public health crisis occasioned by COVID-19, the DRC has not been able to convene since the owner submitted their COA application. This item, therefore, has been placed on tonight's HALRB discussion agenda without any additional consideration or recommendations by the DRC. Staff recommends approval of the subject application. The Maywood Design Guidelines specifically state that historic buildings should be maintained in situ, including outbuildings. However, since the subject outbuilding is non-historic and was built well after the period of significance for the local historic district, which is 1906 to 1941, its demolition will not negatively impact the overall architectural character or the integrity of the district. The scope of this project meets the intent of Chapter 9, demolition, relocation, and subdivision of the Maywood Design Guidelines. And I'm going to click through a few images for you all to see. So here is the plat. The primary dwelling is here, and this is the outbuilding that we're discussing. And here are some existing condition photos of that outbuilding. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Are Mr. or Mrs. Topol present?
Dick, can I quickly ask a question of staff before you do that?
Yes.
Which is, do you happen to have any photos of the actual house? I'm just trying to remember where this is. I know I've seen this before, but
I don't have any, but I'm going to ask if one of my colleagues can pull it up. So if you give us a second, we'll be able to share that.
All right, thank you.
Just give us a second to pull up the photos. Do you want to invite the applicant to speak, Mr. Chair, while we're getting the photos?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Oh,
Mr.
wait, Serena, do you have it?
Oh,
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Serena.
Sorry, we disconnected. So we accidentally disconnected before you pulled these pictures up. So you're looking, you wanted the primary dwelling. And this is Linnea, by the way. Table.
Thank you. Mr. Dutka, do you have some comments? You're muted. Well, why don't we proceed with Mr. Topol?
Thanks, everybody. So I think just a few comments. One is obviously has been stated, it's a non-contributing building. It is, it's a very large shed and really blocks all of the views to the adjoining yards, which is part of the reason why we would like to demolish it. It is also completely different than any of the surrounding houses. So it does not look like it was made to coincide with the house that we, that at 2206. So one other piece of information that might be helpful for the group is we actually own the house, the yellow house in this photo at 2210, and then we remodeled 2206 approximately 4 years ago. And the shed has been there for a while, ever since we moved into 2210. So the shed, again, is the neighbors generally are very negative on the shed, which is also part of the reason why we've decided to demolish it. So I think the neighbors at 2204 are also very supportive, as well as other neighbors in the neighborhood. And we feel the shed is just far too large for the footprint of the yard, and is 3 stories, so it doesn't feel like a shed. It feels like a monstrosity of a building that is kind of stuck right in the middle of the backyard and doesn't really have any functional use. So those are really all of our prepared comments.
Thank you. This matter is before the board. I would ask members of the board if they have any comments or questions. I'll ask again, does anyone have any comments or questions? I'll make a motion otherwise. Great. Somebody trying to get in? I'm going to move that the HLRB approve COA 20-11 to approve demolition of the non-contributing outbuilding at 2206 North Kenmore Street in accordance with Chapter 9 of the Maywood Design Guidelines. The HLRB further moves that any future replacement outbuilding on the property will require a COA. Would anyone like to make a second?
Second. Charles Craig.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion of the motion? All right. Ms. Lucchese Torres will call the roll.
Yes. Mr. Craig, say approved or not approved.
Approved.
Mr. Davis.
Approved.
Mr. Dedka.
Approved.
Ms. Garner.
Approved.
Ms. Ham.
Approved.
Mr. Laporte.
Approved.
Ms. Lawrence.
Approve.
Ms. Rogers.
Approve.
Mr. Wenschel.
Approve.
And Mr. Woodruff. It's unanimous.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Topol and Mrs. Topol. Appreciate
Thank
you
you so much.
Thank
coming.
you all.
It brings us to our final item, a discussion item, which relates to the determination of historic status of an outbuilding on the property located at 3601 North 21st Avenue. And I'd ask the staff, Ms. Jones, to provide the staff report.
So the dwelling at 3601 21st Avenue North in the Maywood Local Historic District was constructed between 1916 and is listed as a contributing resource to the Maywood National Register Historic District. The 10-foot by 12-foot wooden shingle-clad shed located at the northwestern corner of the lot behind the dwelling is also listed as a contributing resource in the Maywood National Register nomination. Note that while the shed's contributing status is defined by the National Register of Historic Places nomination for Maywood, the only historic status being assessed by the HALRB is the outbuilding's local historic district status. There is not a separate local historic district nomination for the Maywood Local Historic District. The HALRB therefore references the historic status of resources in the National Register nomination to consider the appropriateness of changes to resources within the local historic district boundaries. The HALRB's determination in this matter will have no bearing on the status of this resource as it is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The property owners are asking the HALRB to assess the historic status of the shed on their property. They would like to demolish the shed and construct a new 300 square foot garage along the northern boundary of the parcel. Staff advised the owners first to request that the HALRB review the historic designation status of the shed before submitting their certificate of appropriateness application. At this time, the staff is requesting that the HALRB make a determination that either one, the shed was built during the period of significance of the Maywood Historic District and is therefore contributing to the district, the local historic district, or two, the shed was built after the district's period of significance, which again is 1906 to 1941, and therefore should be considered non-contributing for the purposes of the local historic district. If the HALRB finds that the shed is a non-contributing resource, then the property owners will submit a COA application proposing demolition of the shed and detailing the design of the new proposed garage. Although the Maywood National Register nomination indicates that the shed at this property is a contributing resource, preservation staff has found archival evidence that suggests that the shed postdates Maywood's period of significance. Historic insurance maps show that while there was an outbuilding on the parcel in 1935 and in 1943, there was no outbuilding on the property in 1952 or 1959. County aerial photographs show a new outbuilding on the property by 1962. However, this outbuilding was constructed well after the end of the period of significance for the historic district. Furthermore, Arlington County's Historic Building Permit Index indicates that a 10-foot by 20-foot shed was erected on the property around May 1974. Aerial photographs confirm that the outbuilding on the property as seen in the 1962 aerial changed between 1974 and 1983. Given this information, the extant shed most likely dates to 1974. Given this information, staff recommends that the HALRB change the Maywood Local Historic District status of the shed at 3601 21st Avenue North from contributing to non-contributing, since archival evidence demonstrates that one, the extant shed on the property postdates the 1906 to 1941 period of significance of the local historic district, and two, that the extant shed probably dates to 1974. I'm going to click through a few images. These are existing condition photos of the shed in question. And this is a lot study that the applicant submitted. So you can see the existing 120 square foot shed here. This is the proposed garage and the proposed driveway. There is already a curb cut here. Again, this is not a COA application. We're not here to discuss the proposed design of a garage or driveway. This is just so that you know sort of what will be coming next. These are the historic insurance map images. So on the left here, 1943, you can see that there's an outbuilding on the property. In the 1952 plat, you can see that that outbuilding is no longer extant. And then this was actually confirmed in a second set of insurance maps, the Sanborn insurance maps. There's no outbuilding in 1959. This 1962 aerial photo here shows an outbuilding in this location on the property, which is a different footprint and location than the outbuilding on the property today. This concludes the staff report.
That's great. Thank you. And I want to commend staff, Ms. Jones, I guess in particular, but perhaps others, for the really superb research that went into this, and taking time to track down all those old photographs and maps and stuff. Really, really nice job. Thank you. This matters now. Well, actually, we need to hear from the applicants if they are present on the call. Is Ms. Moore or Mr. O'Keefe or O'Rourke on the call?
Yep, we're here.
Great.
We're both here. Hi. First of all, we also want to thank Angelina and her staff for the amazing job they did. We had started this inquiry way back in February, so before everything started to happen, because we were just thinking, quote unquote, thinking about building a garage or a parking pad on our lot. And immediately it came up that this was a historic shed, and anything we would have proposed or looked at would have had to be worked around the shed. So we decided to take the advice of both our architects and contractors and Angelina and go ahead and put the shed on the agenda first to see if in fact this can be, and we hope it will be, and we think the evidence shows that it's not contributing. And then we're able to move forward if we want to build a garage, if we want to build a parking pad, if we want to keep the shed, but we really couldn't invest any more money and time until we knew about the designation of the shed. And I think now we've all agreed that it is not historical in nature, and we hope in fact that, you know, it will be a consensus that that's true, and then we can move forward in our planning.
Great, thank you. Stick around in case there are some questions from the board members.
Okay.
And are there questions or comments that board members wish to make? I'm not hearing any. Is anybody trying to get in but are muted? Okay. If that's the case, I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion. I move that, is anybody trying to get in? Okay. I move that the HALRB, pursuant to the historical documentation presented, declares the outbuilding on the property located at 3601 21st Avenue North to be a non-historic, non-contributing structure for the purposes of the Maywood Local Historic District. Is there a second?
Second, Charles Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Is there any further discussion of the motion? All right, I'll ask Ms. Lachese Torres to call the roll.
Okay, please respond approved or not approved. Mr. Craig.
Approved.
Mr. Davis.
Approved.
Mr. Dedka. Second chance, Mr. Dedka.
You may be on mute.
Okay, I'll come back to him at the end. Miss Garner?
Approved.
Miss Ham?
Approve.
Mr. Laporte?
Approve.
Ms. Lawrence?
Approve.
Ms. Rogers?
Approve.
Mr. Wenschel? Mr. Wenschel? I'll come back in a second. Mr. Woodruff.
Approved.
Okay, checking back with Mr. Dudka. Are you still on the call?
Yes.
Who was that you,
Mr.
Andy? Okay, Andy,
Yes.
so you're
Approved.
approved? Okay,
Yes.
so now we're missing Robert. Are you still on the call? Okay, I think he must have dropped off. So even without his vote, the motion carries 9-1 or 9-0, 9-0, 9-0. I guess we should say 9-0. Is he abstained at this point?
He didn't, he's a non-vote, I think.
Okay, so
9-0.
it passes 9-0.
Correct. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Moore. Appreciate your being with us tonight. It's all approved.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that concludes our agenda for this historic meeting. And before we close, again, I want to apologize for the confusion over that motion business on item 3. I guess it worked out, and my sense from the motion is that if it's revealed that the height of the panel's arrangement exceeds 6 inches, he'll have to come back to the board. Is that correct, or was that your assessment, or just to the DRC or to staff? Can we get a sort of clarification of that before we hang up?
Mr. Chair, can you repeat your question? My connection slowed down there for a second. I did not catch your whole comment.
Sure, no worries. I was a little worried about the confusion over that vote, and so my sense is from because Jones' amendment passed, that the applicant, if it's revealed that the array of his solar panel will exceed 6 inches on that garage roof, that he will have to come back. My question is, come back to where?
Hello?
Is that you, Robert?
Hello? Yeah.
Welcome back. Did you want to respond to Dick's question?
He may not have heard it if he wasn't on the line.
So the motion that you all made and passed included not to exceed 6 inches. And so if it is higher than that amount, then technically they would need to get an amendment for their COA request.
Okay, so they would have to come back to the board.
Correct.
Okay.
Is how staff is interpreting it.
Right. And I think that makes sense. Okay.
That's basically what I intended by the amendment.
Good. Okay.
So.
That makes sense.
Okay. Before we go, I just wanted to thank everybody who was responsible for setting this up. Dick for running the meeting, staff for everything they did to set it up, and yeah, it went very well. So thank you.
You're welcome. And from the staff side, thank you all to all of our commissioners for being so patient as we waited to get the meetings underway.
Cynthia?
Yes.
So I assume that the thing was voted on already?
Yes, we lost you there during the vote. It passed unanimously 9-0.
Okay.
Okay.
The comment I have about this, and we can talk to tomorrow if you want, or after you get done, finishing up the meeting, because I was going to make there was really inopportunity. I was going to make some comments about this, because when I look at this building, it does not look like something that was built in 1974. That looks very old to me. Everything about the construction of it looks old. And if it is indeed true that it was that there was not, the aerials show that it wasn't there, then maybe it was moved from somewhere else. This does not look like a 1974 building to me. And I think I don't know, it feels like to me like it needs more research, but anyway. that was going to be my comment.
Thank you for sharing your comment. Just a quick staff reaction to that. We've pretty much accessed all of the different historic records that we could that we have available to us, including historic insurance maps, 2 different kinds, as well as our historic building permit cards, as well as aerial photographs. So there really isn't any additional paper trail that we would be able to.
But did anyone examine the building itself? Because when I look at the photos, you look at the details of it, everything is consistent with a building that would have been built in the 20s or 30s. I mean, even the way the door is constructed with that kind of Z bracing on the back, everything about it looks old to me. And I have to say, even the concrete ramp looks old to me. So, I mean, did anybody go and look at it in person?
Serena and I, this is Angelina Jones. Serena and I did visit the site in person back on March 11th, so right before quarantine.
Right.
Yeah. But we really were going with our archival evidence, especially because our building permit index shows a 1974 permit for a 10 by 12 shed.
Okay. Well, I mean, if then somebody built it very, very consistent with, with historic practice. So anyway, all right. I just wanted to get those comments in. That's it.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone too, particularly the staff, for making sure that we were able to meet. I know it was not an easy lift because the way this started out, the county manager and the county board, but I think it was mostly the county manager, was imposed some very, very strict rules around these meetings and making it quite difficult for them to take place. So those were the rules that the staff had to work with to make this happen. Those rules have been somewhat relaxed now, and hopefully we'll be able to meet every month going forward, but it's not a certainty. But I want to thank them for making that happen, because I thought it was really important that we meet, and I'm sure you all do too. And with that, that's all I have to say, but I don't want to cut the conversation short because there are a bunch of you here, and everyone, please.
I would suggest that if we don't have to, that maybe we should adjourn so that the recording could be turned off.
Okay, that's a good idea. We are adjourned.